Our look at the life of David and his reign as king, and we're in 2 Samuel chapter 16 this week, so you can turn there. Initially, I was kind of in my long-term planning. I was going to do this whole chapter. I'm actually shortening it a little bit because I think it breaks a little better this way. So we're going to be in 2 Samuel 16 verses 1 to 14, and then we'll the next time it'll be a couple of weeks, because I'm going to throw a song in there too. It'll be good. But so for context, if you're just jumping in, you're like, I don't know what's going on. For my friends who they're like, we don't even go to this church. Where are we? So we've been looking at the life of King David, and he's been king in Israel, but things have not been going really well for him lately. Like, he's had all this victory. God has blessed him and put him on the throne. But we see that David, like anyone, can let that kind of thing go to his head. And several chapters ago, we looked at it, I don't know, like a month ago. We read how David used his, the power he had, his position, his privilege as king. That God had made him king to shepherd his people, and then he kind of abused his authority. And he ends up having an affair with this woman named Bathsheba, and then he tries to cover his tracks, and that plan doesn't really work. And so he essentially has her husband, a faithful soldier named Uriah, who is at the time off fighting for David. He has been killed to kind of cover things up. And he takes Bathsheba as his wife, and it's like he thinks he's going to get away with it. He's covering it up, keeping a lid on this scandal. But God saw and spoke to a man named Nathan, who was a prophet, and he went to David and said, God saw what you did. And he's really displeased. Why would you do that? If you were lacking something, I would have given you whatever you wanted. And so there was going to be consequences in David's life. One of them happened pretty soon. It says that the son that is going to be born to Bathsheba, the result of this illicit union, will die. That has happened. And he was also promised that God would raise up calamity for David, or evil for David, from within his own house. And that these different things would happen. And so in the last couple of weeks, we've been reading how that part has kind of been coming to happen as David's son Absalom has been like scheming and plotting and having this really cunning long-range view to gain all this political support. And last week we read how he proclaimed himself king. Right? Now, when you're the prince, and your father's the king, there's an understanding that you will be king at some point, but usually dad has to die. And Absalom wasn't wanting to wait for that, or maybe help it along. He's proclaimed himself king. And last week we read how David heard this news and decided to leave Jerusalem. Right? He could have said, no, we're going to stay, we're going to fight, we're going to negotiate, but he left. And so this chapter is a picture, and if you've got your bullet, I don't have notes in it. I've been kind of skipping on that in the summer a little bit, but I've called it a long walk, because this is one of those parts of the story where they're just walking. A lot of good stories are journey stories, right? Like, it's just, you read The Lord of the Rings, it's like, that was a long walk, right? In a sense. This is not that long, but this is a long walk, not just because they were covering a fair bit of distance, but because of the burden that David was carrying. Just before we jump into the text, I want to ask you, because I suspect most of you can think of examples. Have you ever been wrongly accused of something? Like, it's not true, but they're lying about you, or something has happened and they're blaming you. Maybe you can think of, and it does happen sometimes where it's complete fabrication. Have you ever had this version of it? I have more of these, where it's like, it's kind of right. I was involved in the thing that ended up going very badly and not all of that, but they're like, it's all his fault and he meant to do it. It's like, no, that's not, yes, I was this, but not all of, right? But it can get twisted. People do it to get out of trouble. Maybe you're like, well, this is uncomfortable because I'm the guy that's usually like shifting the blame. I mean, we're humans. David is experiencing some of that. And I think when we go through that, we probably ask some of the questions that David asks. It feels unfair, right? That's just not fair. That's just not true. And why would that happen? And where is God in that? What do we do with it? Is it our responsibility to make sure that we get louder than those who are accusing us, and we make sure everyone hears our side of the story. And maybe if we get the chance to do that, we'll put a little bit of spin on the ball and make our accusers look slightly worse than they were, because after all, they were trying to do that to us. What do? David, for all of his flaws, is still a man after God's own heart. And I think in this story that we're going to look at, this part of the story, we see that he's setting a good example in that David he trusts judgment to God. He doesn't feel like he needs to make sure that the record gets set straight. He trusts judgment to God, who is perfectly just, but who is also abounding in steadfast love. And David is just convinced that God is seeing and he's going to judge and that God is right. But man, is that easy to hold on to when you're in these situations, or is it difficult? I think it's difficult. Let's see. So we're gonna see essentially two episodes. We're going to meet two people that David runs into, and both of them are connected to the house of Saul. So we're going to read starting at verse 1 of chapter 16. It said, "When David had passed a little beyond the summit, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of donkeys saddled, bearing 200 loaves of bread, 100 bunches of raisins, 100 of summer fruits, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba, 'Why have you brought these?' Ziba answered, 'The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who faint in the wilderness to drink.' And the king said, 'And where is your master's son?' Ziba said to the king, 'Behold, he remains in Jerusalem, for he said, "Today the house of Israel will give me back the kingdom of my father." Then the king said to Ziba, 'Behold, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours.' And Ziba said, 'I pay homage. Let me ever find favor in your sight, my lord the king.'" So there's some weird names in that story. And if you're like, hold on, who is that again? Was he, what's going on? So David is fleeing. It says he's a little past the summit. He's just gone over the Mount of Olives. This is familiar territory even in the New Testament, right? Jesus was facing some of these similar things on that hill much later. But he meets these guys. So just as a reminder, Mephibosheth, what a great name. My son was trying to pronounce it. We were hanging out a little bit this morning, and I was joking, but I said, "Bud, it was a real toss-up. We were going to name you that. That was such a great name." Right? Call him Fibs for short. Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, who was the son of King Saul. So King Saul was the first king of Israel, and David was kind of a member of his court, member of his military, actually became his son-in-law, and was like soulmate best buddies with Jonathan, the prince. Both Saul and his son Jonathan were killed in battle with the Philistines, and we read, and I'll refer to this a couple of times. Back in 2 Samuel chapter 9, we read how David had sort of realized he had made a promise, a covenant with his friend Jonathan. Because Jonathan knew, right? Jonathan is the king, the prince. He's the heir apparent. But he knows God has given the kingdom to David. Like, think about that, right? Jonathan's like, my whole life growing up, I was sort of told, like, one day, son, all this will be yours, right? Everything the light touches is. But he recognized, I'm not going to get that. My good friend is going to get that, and he didn't plot to get it out of the way. He had all these motives, but he was just so committed to him, and he basically said, promise me that when you become king, you show kindness to me. Because that's not normally how it goes, right? If I'm part of this dynasty and it gets out of the way and another king comes in, normally all of these people have a very short life expectancy. Jonathan's like, promise that you'll show kindness to me and my family. David's like, of course, I promise you. So then you fast forward, and now David's king. Saul and Jonathan are long dead. And we read in 2 Samuel 9 how David said, is there anyone left from the house of Saul that I can show kindness to honor this promise I made to my friend Jonathan? He was probably feeling nostalgic, missed his friend. And so he gets a hold of this guy, Ziba. Ziba was known to be the servant or the chief steward, sort of like the manager of King Saul's estate. Somehow he was still around, still alive. They knew where he was. They found him. Maybe that was a tense meeting. Ziba's like, here we go. David has called me and I'm done. But David asks, is there anyone left? Yes, he says, there's this guy Mephibosheth. He's the grown son of Prince Jonathan. And he's crippled in both of his feet. There's a whole story. And David's like, bring him to me. And he brings him, and it's probably a little tense. Mephibosheth is like, I am doomed. And I can't even run away. But David says, no, you know what? You're going to sit at my table. You're going to live in my house. I'm going to take care of you because I was such good friends. I loved your father, and I'm going to show kindness to you. And he told, in that chapter, he told Ziba, right? He says, listen, everything that belonged to your master, Saul, I now give to Jonathan. So that would have been like the property and the holdings. It's not like I'm making him king, but it's... So, Ziba, you and your guys... You're working for Mephibosheth now, and you take care of stuff. That's the way it goes. So that was how things were. And now David is fleeing for his life, and all of these people who are loyal to him have come, and we met a bunch of them last week. And now here's Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, with donkeys and stuff. It says he was there with a couple of donkeys. That is more likely translated a string of donkeys, like a bunch of donkeys, because of the stuff he's carrying and the fact that he's like, oh, the donkeys are for the king and his family to ride on. It's like, how big are these donkeys if there's two and we're all going to, they're big full-size van donkeys. It's the extended wheelbase model. But we see in this conversation, David seems maybe a little bit suspicious, right? Ziba, what are you doing here? That phrase, it gets translated, why have you brought these? It's kind of like a, what is the deal with these? What are these to you? Kind of like, is this yours? What's going on? Because he sees Ziba, but he doesn't see Mephibosheth. Ziba does not answer the question directly. Where did you get? It's like, oh, this is all for you. I'm bringing you good stuff. So David sharpens the question a little bit. And where is your master's son? Like, where's your boss? Where's Mephibosheth? And he gets this story. Ziba says, he remains in Jerusalem, for he said, today that Israel will give me back the throne, the kingdom of my father. That's rough. There's some parallels here, and I don't want to camp a long time on this, but there's just so many neat parallels to this. First, the list and the way that these provisions are described. Ziba shows up with these donkeys and all of these things for not just David. It's not just, I brought you goodies, Dave. I brought you a coffee, just the way you like it. It's like, I brought stuff for you and it's practical things that will help your team. It's very similar to the story that we read way back in 1 Samuel 25, when David's on the run in the wilderness, and this lady Abigail sends out this peace offering, right? David had requested some assistance from her husband, Nabal, who was a landowner that David and his friends had kind of been helping by chasing off the bandits and stuff. And Nabal's like, no, I'm not giving you any. He was just a real, mean. And David was getting upset. It's like, after all we've done, that's it. Let's just go and kill them all and take their stuff. His wise wife, Abigail, comes out. David, my husband's, he's a fool. She says that. That's what his name means, actually, so she was being correct. And offers him all of it. It was very, very similar. It's like donkeys with the same kind of thing. Raisins, which I guess are a good deal when you're out hiking. Trail mix, right? Some things to drink, right? And David decides, okay, I will, thank you. He says, I was really losing my cool for a second. I was about to do something I was going to regret. Thank you for doing that. And like a good Western, he ends up with the girl in the end. It was, Nabal has a heart attack, and anyway. So it's very similar. And I think we needed to remember, and I recapped what had happened in 2 Samuel 9, right? David had shown unexpected kindness to Mephibosheth. The normal protocol would be David one day going, is there anyone left from the house of Saul? We should get them and kill them, just in case there's trouble brewing, right? Everything seems calm, but there could be some little pocket somewhere with some great nephew of Saul, and he's saying, I have the rightful claim. Let's bring them in and kill them. But he doesn't. He shows kindness to these people. And now he gets news that this crippled grandson of the former king has betrayed him. There's some questions here. Does David trust Ziba? His questions seem suspicious, and we know, if you know the story, in a couple of chapters, we're going to get the other side of the story, right? Mephibosheth says it doesn't go that way. But at this point, David only has Ziba's side. And it's hard to say. It's hard to say from the biblical evidence if he's telling the truth, who is more likely, right? I think this probably hit David very hard, right? He is the emotional strain that David is under. I mean, he's walking in humility. He is accepting these things. We saw last week, and it continues. But man, whether he believes Ziba or he thinks, okay, right, I'll keep him close until I can see what happens. David knows that someone who had been close to King Saul, his enemy, and who David had shown mercy to, has betrayed him. Whether it's Mephibosheth, whether it's exactly as Ziba says, or if there's something else going on, there's no way this can't be a betrayal. David has shown kindness and has been repaid with betrayal. Then this next section is slightly longer and slightly more colorful. But we see that David, in addition to being betrayed after showing kindness to Jonathan's son, now he is getting cursed out after sparing Saul's life. We jump in again at verse 5. It says, when King David came to Bahurim, there came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. And as he came, he cursed continually. And he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and his left. And Shimei said as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. The Lord has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned, and the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood. Just to pause there, that is like, those are fighting words, right? This guy is upset, and he's one guy, and King David is surrounded by his mighty men, and he's chucking rocks and chucking words, and so then what happens? It says, then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over there and take off his head. The king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing me because the Lord has said to him, curse David, who shall then say, why have you done this? And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite? Leave him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look on the wrong done to me, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing today. So David and his men went along the road with Shimei. He went along on the hillside opposite to him, and he cursed as he went, and he threw stones at him and flung dust. And the king and all the people who were with him arrived weary at the Jordan, and there he refreshed himself. So this is a really interesting and dramatic scene. It's like, we get a lot of information. I'm like, I wish I could have seen that. Couple of things that we can infer. News travels fast, right? It does now, it does then. And so this Shimei, he lives in this village that's on the other side of the Mount of Olives, but he's heard the news, right? Absalom has declared himself king in Hebron. He's moving towards Jerusalem. David and everyone has fled. So like David is moving at the speed of a large group, but it seems some people have run out and passed the word. And so this guy hears it, and he is so moved that he does something that is, for all intents and purposes, suicidal. Like this guy is so moved and committed to this that he comes out to where he knows the king is coming and not by himself. All of these people, and he's like, I've got some things to say. Like, really? You couldn't have like written him a letter? A nasty, letter to the editor in the newspaper? It's like, nope. He goes right out to him. And he's like hurling these words and he's chucking rocks, right? Like that is both an insult, but that is a desperate move. Like David is surrounded by something like 600 mercenaries, armed, right? Like, talk about taking a knife to a gunfight. This guy is, And he didn't come armed, right? He didn't like, I'm going to assassinate the king. He would have brought a bow or a spear. He's just so mad. He's chucking rocks. It's like, you are going to get yourself killed. Like and the things that he's saying against the Lord's anointed, like that is tantamount to blasphemy, right? But he is convinced. So what do we see about Shimei? Obviously he's motivated. He believes what he's saying. He's not an opportunist, right? Who says nothing until it looks like the tide has now turned and there won't be any backlash. And he's like, yeah, I never liked you either, David, nah, right? It's like, nope, this guy is putting his money where his mouth is, and he's out there. Shimei is bitter. Like this is a bitter man, motivated by this hatred. And not just dislike, not just like, I was cheering for Saul's team and David's team won. Boo, but now it looks like they're not going to make it into the playoffs. So it's not one of those. He's convinced that a wrong was done to the house of Saul by David. He's got a version of events where it's like, David is a villain. David never should have been on the throne. God can't be pleased with him. You notice, right? He doesn't just say, you took the throne from King Saul and you shouldn't. It's like, no, the Lord is visiting this on you, David. Like he's almost speaking as though he's a prophet. He's seeing it. So he's bitter. First, I wanted to decamp there before we move. He's from Saul's clan. It says he's from the family that is related, like he's a Benjamite. So he's related distantly to Saul. And he calls David a man of blood. I've been called a lot of things. Never been called a man of blood. Anyone here, someone has chucked that at you in a moment of pique, right? They're just like, you man of blood. I've not heard that one. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean David has killed a lot of people, right? Nowadays, that would be a pretty serious accusation. If I've killed a lot of people, that's a problem. David, though, like he's been a warrior for most of his life. This is not the same as way back when David was working for King Saul and the people were celebrating their victories in battle by singing, David has slain his tens of thousands, right? That's not Shimei saying, tens of thousands, that's a lot of blood, Dave. No, calling him a man of blood, it's like you have blood-stained hands. This isn't being a mighty warrior in battle. This is you have killed needlessly or unjustly. You are a murderer, not just a warrior. They saw in that culture very clearly a difference between killing an enemy in battle and just murdering someone to get your own way or out of revenge. And Shimei says, that's what you've done, David. You're a man of blood. When the verse or the phrase that's translated when he says, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man, or you worthless fellow, depending on your translation. I'm not a Hebrew scholar. Couple of the commentators I'm reading, it's actually you man of Belial, you man of the devil, right? It's like you're so worthless that's your level, David. So these are serious words. Why is he so upset? Who does he think David has murdered? Well, I think there's a couple of possible cases, and I'm not going to dive way into them, but I'll mention, you can take a look. Back in 2 Samuel chapter 3, David is just consolidating his rule. He's been declared king of Judah in Hebron, but king in Israel, in the northern part, there was still one last holdout from the family of Saul, and there was his general, Abner, the son of Ner. He was related to Saul. And so he was like the enemy general, but he went into peace negotiations with David, and they were looking at a way that they could merge these kingdoms without breaking down into all-out war. And David sent Abner away in peace, but David's general, Joab, heard about it and was like, no. And so he went, Abner, hold on. The king forgot to tell you something. Yeah, just come over here, come over. Boink, and stabbed him in the guts and killed him, right? And that news travels fast. David, very clearly, it's like, I did not order that. I am innocent. My house, just so everyone knows, I am forever innocent of the blood of Abner. But the house of Saul, it seems, was saying, methinks he doth protest too much. Of course he's going to say he's innocent. His general killed the guy. And so that memory is likely still hanging around. There is also a possibility that there's an event that's alluded to later in the book, in 2 Samuel chapter 21. And I mentioned earlier when we were moving through the life of David that strict chronological order is not the main concern of the the author of this book, and especially the last, I think, 4 or so chapters of 2 Samuel are really, they seem to be kind of almost a hodgepodge of events that are not necessarily recorded in chronological order. And when we get there in a few weeks, they're actually arranged in a pretty strategic literary sense. So all that to say, there's an event that happens there that may have actually already occurred at this point in the timeline. And that is where there's a drought in the land. And David is, for 3 years, David inquires of the Lord what's going on, and it's revealed to him through a prophet. This is punishment because King Saul, back under the previous king, he went and killed a bunch of these Gibeonites who way back in the days of Joshua had made a treaty with Israel, and they weren't going to get killed. Saul, in his zeal, killed a bunch of these guys, and now there's this drought. So David went to the leader of the Gibeonites, how can I make this right? And they're like, we don't want money, that's not going to do it. And he's like, well, what do you need? He goes, give us 7 descendants of the house of Saul, and we're going to execute them, which sounds really brutal, right? I don't think the passage is not condoning that. We'll get there in a few weeks. But David finds these distant relatives, arrests them, hands them over, and they get executed. If that has happened at this point, which it seems actually more likely, given the way David's reign worked, that this would have happened before, that would have been, hey, David, that's just mean. You're already the king and you're rounding up relatives to have them executed like criminals. What did they do? Obviously leaving out the part about what Saul did. So he's got some possible reasons for being angry at David. So we see Shimei is bitter. Shimei is also logical. He's not a stupid person. He knows, or he thinks he knows, some things about David's shady deeds. Abner didn't die by accident, David. That happened on your watch, in your town, from your general. That is awfully coincidental, right? So he knows some things, and now he sees some things unfolding in the kingdom that look a lot like David is getting chased out and replaced by his son. So Shimei naturally concludes, very much like we would do, we just connect the dots. It's funny, Dave, you do bad things and bad things happen. That is God repaying David for his evil deeds, tearing the kingdom out of his hands. Shimei is utterly convinced. He's willing to die declaring it. He says that's what it is. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand, David, because of these things you have done. So the question is Shimei correct? I would say he's not entirely correct. This is at the beginning when I'm have you ever been accused and there is some truth in it? It's not total fabrication. What are you talking about? I wasn't even there. I don't know. It's no, I was there, and yes, I messed up in this and this, but that other thing is not, right? I think that's kind of what's going on here. And it's very easy. It doesn't make Shimei a villain. It makes him human. We do that too. We like easy answers, especially when something bad has happened. I want the clear villain to place the blame on. I need that category very clear, and that, right? And don't confuse me with the details. So Shimei is overlooking some things, I think. He calls David a man of blood. David, as you've used your authority to kill people, not in battle, but just to get your way. That's evil. Shimei is conveniently overlooking some facts about Saul. If you're wanting to compare David to Saul, right? Back in 2 Samuel chapter 22, we read how Saul ordered the slaughter of the entire town of Nob. It didn't have a great name, okay? I get it. But that wasn't why. One of Saul's little toadies saw the priest in that town helping David. Saul comes and says, you're all against me. No, my king, that's not what happened. Nope, kill them all. Even Saul's own guys are that's a bit rich. We're not doing that. But this guy Doeg, who was trying to kiss up, so he said, I'll do it. And killed not just all the priests, the whole family, but it says the whole town. The men, the women, the donkeys, right? This was a big... So who's a man of blood? Shimei of the house of Saul somehow has categorized that differently. As I said, if the events that are alluded to in chapter 21 have happened already, yes, David handed over some of Saul's descendants to the Gibeonites, but why? Trace that back, Shimei. King Saul went and killed a bunch of people that had made a treaty with Israel generations ago. Maybe he was just zealous, right? It's they're not Israelites, let's kill them too. But it's dude, that was not, you were not authorized to kill them. And then there's the irony, and this is the part that I think David's got to be thinking about. This is where it's not just like, oh, I'm kind of guilty of that. It's like, but you're so wrong, right? This not son, but a relative of Saul, basically saying, I'm from Saul. David, you did mean things to the house of Saul. You are being rejected by the Lord because you're a man of blood. And it's like David saying, did you even read the rest of 1st and 2nd Samuel? No, he hasn't. That hasn't been written yet. But what happened? Well-known passages that we went through, right? 2 Samuel chapter 24. David is on the run from King Saul. Note, David has not committed a crime and he's being hunted by a righteous king. David has been nothing but faithful. His crime is, God has said, Saul, you've disobeyed me. I'm going to make this guy king. And Saul is like, not on my watch. Saul is determined to hunt down David and kill him. David's just trying to not die. He's hiding in a cave. Saul and his men are looking, and doesn't Saul come into the cave to use the washroom? All the men are in the back. Really awkward scene, right? I did not want to see this. Right? But they say to David, it's like, this is it, David. The Lord has delivered your enemy into your hands. You could kill him. And David's like, I'm not going to do that. Sneaks up and cuts off a bit of his robe, right? Remember the story. Saul goes out, and then David comes out and basically says, why are you hunting me as though I'm your enemy? Look, if I wanted to kill you, I could have. Recognize this fabric? And he's like, oh my goodness, right? So David, if he was a man of blood, it's like, I did the opposite. And then, to put a very fine point on it, there was a next 2 chapters later in 1 Samuel 24. David sneaks down into the camp. Saul and his army are hunting him. It's night, they're camped there, and David's like, I'm going to go down there and make my point again. Who will come with me? Well, who volunteers but Abishai, the same guy that was just in this story, right? They go down. Saul is sleeping. It says that the Lord had made them like they were sleeping really, really well. And they sneak right up, and it's like, we're right by the king. And Abishai is like, let me kill him. Like, that's what you do. He's your enemy. I've got a spear. I'll only hit him once. Like, boink, Saul kebab, right to the ground. And David's like, no, you don't. Stop, put that away. Seriously, put it away. We're just taking his spear and his jug. Come on. Seriously, Abishai, come on, right? Just one poke, just no, right? And the same kind of deal. He goes up on the hill, and it's like, hey, whose jug and spear are this? If I was trying to kill you, same deal. And so now you've got Shimei up on the hill, mad, red in the face, throwing curses, throwing accusations, throwing insults, throwing rocks, even in verse 13 where it says, and he flung dust. That uses a phrase that doesn't show up anywhere else in the Bible. We do this a lot in English now, where we will make a verb out of a noun, right? Like if I hit you with a pillow, you could say, oh, I pillowed him. Well, this is like that. It literally says, and he dirtied him with dirt. Like he's just throwing everything down, anything he can chuck, right? It may imply dung in there. This guy's throwing everything at David. You're a man of blood. It's like in that very moment, there's David, and who's beside him but Abishai? Maybe he got dinged with a rock or something. And he's like, why did this dead dog? Let me go up and take off his head, right? I love the clinical, it's not even like, let me go up and defeat him in battle. It's like, I'll just go and just remove the head, and then the mouth stops. You notice? It's very simple, Dave. We don't need to deal with this. We got enough stuff. It's a mosquito. Let me swat it. Once again, right, Abishai is like, I'm very quick to kill people in the house of Saul. And David is like, cool your jets, Abishai. Don't kill him. Don't go up and kill the guy who is currently accusing me of wanton murder of the house of Saul, right? It's like, dude, I am actually doing the opposite right now of what you're accusing me of. And that is the only reason you're still able to throw. But he doesn't get mad, right? We see this ironic parallels, but David doesn't argue with him. And I'm about to land the plane, and this is blinking at me saying the plane should already be on the runway. Sorry. Flight has been slightly delayed. We see that David doesn't argue with him. Why is that? David knows he's not guilty of all the things Shimei is accusing him of. He knows that, right? He knows the story. He was there. But while he's not guilty in the way that Shimei thinks, he is guilty of shedding innocent blood. He knows that. Uriah the Hittite, Bathsheba's husband, who he had assassinated. David, it's never far from his mind that all of this that he's going through is part of his punishment, his chastisement, his discipline from the hand of the Lord for the sins that he has committed. So he's like, Shimei might not know the whole thing, but maybe God has put it on his heart to curse me. Maybe that's why he's so keyed up. Maybe David is looking and going, look, this isn't just an annoyed man. Like, he's come out against all of it. He's clearly, he's very motivated. Maybe God has told him to do this. See, David sees God's hand in all of this. He sees God's hand in Absalom's treason against him, and he knows that David deserves all of this and more, including the cursings of this angry Benjamite. He knows that his sin deserves death, and God has spared him that. So anything that God in his wisdom decides to visit upon David, David says, I've got no right to complain. Yeah, but David, he's saying things about you that aren't true, and he's dirtying us with dirt. Seriously. And David's like, I'm not going to fight him. I'm trusting God. He says, maybe God will see. Maybe God will see, and maybe he'll repay me with good for the affliction I'm suffering, right? He sees that what he's going through is affliction. There is a not just part to it. Yes, I'm being driven out by my treasonous son and accused of all kinds of things, and this Ziba with me, you're munching raisins, those may be stolen, we're not sure, right? All of this, but he's like, I've got it coming. So he speaks to Abishai, he says to all of the people, look, my own son's out to get me. Of course, let this guy yap. That's fine. David trusts judgment to God. He just does. God, who is perfectly just and who is abounding in steadfast love. He's like, yeah, God is going to see. God might deliver me out, or it might be God's will to not deliver me. I might get the kingdom back, or this might be the end of my run. God is good. He's got it. Oh, but David, he's saying mean things about you. He's chucking rocks. God will deal with him too. God's God. He's got it. And so he trusts judgment to God. It mentions that they arrive at their location exhausted. Do you think? Yeah, right? It's not just the dirt, but it's the weight of all of this. And yet in it, he trusts God. So what about us? I want us to think of 3 things and then we'll be done. And these are more reminders to me, but I think they might be helpful to you as well. First, especially when we find ourselves accused or facing what feels like unfair things, we need to never forget that God sees. God sees and knows everything perfectly. And isn't that what it's about? It's like, oh, but they need to know my side. They don't know what that guy said. He's accusing me of that, but he doesn't know what happened, and I can't. It's like, God knows. God knows, right? So what's more important, the opinion of your accusers or what God knows? God knows, and we don't. And either do the people who would accuse us, and either would the people who would defend us, right? Shimei doesn't know the whole story, either does Abishai. David doesn't even know all the facts, but he knows that God knows. So we don't need to convince God of our innocence. He knows you better than you do. Second thing, God sometimes, you need to underline sometimes, that's not in your notes, just pretend, right? He sometimes uses the words and deeds of other fallen people to chastise, humble, and correct us. God often uses people to accomplish his will. We know that. We like to think of it as, hey, you know what? God uses my gifts, my little abilities to answer the prayers of other people in his body as I can be the hands and feet of Jesus. Yeah, that's wonderful. God also sometimes uses people to correct. And he uses imperfect people because that's all he's got. And so listen, someone could be bringing accusations against you. A Shimei could be chucking rocks and dirtying you with dirt, and you could be like, but this guy, you don't even know, oh, that's real rich, you talking. What about that thing that you did last week or last year? Was that right? What did I do? Right? Or you blame the sound guy. What was that? And we can quickly get defensive if accusations come from someone who is themselves not perfect, right? We're like, you have no right to say that thing about me or visit that thing on me because you yourself are not perfect. Listen, God uses imperfect tools. The tool that he uses on your life, the fact that that tool is dirty or imperfect does not mean that the hand that wields it is not perfect. Okay? God uses imperfect people. Sometimes he uses them to correct us. Our tendency to get defensive is usually aimed at the people's imperfections, but we can trust that God knows. Lastly, we cannot assume God's favor with us in terms of he's on my team against my accuser. He is going to restore it to me, not them. I'm going to pray that the Leafs win, not the Canucks, and they'll win, right? Obviously not. Or I'll get the job, not that person. God, we cannot assume that just because we claim allegiance to God, that God is ours and we are his, and that's true, that we can connect the dot and be like, God is rooting for my agenda. David himself had better reasons than us to think that God was on his side. God spoke prophetically to him. I am going to put you on the throne. I'm going to hold you with my hand and put you there. And then he's got decades of experience of God getting him through scrapes and stuff. If anyone could be like, God is on my team, it was David. And he goes, if God finds favor with me, he'll bring me back. And if not, right? We cannot assume God's favor with us in terms of him voting for what we want, but we can be confident. In my notes, I said we can always bet on. That's horrible. You could, I guess. We can be confident that God will always show grace to the humble. He might not be, can't assume God's favor with us. He might not give you what you think you want or you deserve, but God will always give grace to the humble. So when we find ourselves in these unfair situations, if we resist the urge to magnify ourselves, which is essentially what we're doing, right? When we're like, I'm not as bad as that guy, you should hear, you need to hear my side of the story, right? 2 Peter 5:5 said, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. If we have a trust in God, it allows us to walk humbly, and we can be utterly confident that God will give us the grace that we need. Let's pray. Lord, we do thank you that you are with us, and not with us in a primitive sense where we're like, we pray to our God and he will give us rain and give us victory in battle and help us to be more successful than our enemies and all of those. You're not a tribal God. You're the God of the heavens and the earth. You're the God of everything. And we can trust in your goodness to us because of your great love for us. Lord, I thank you so much that you know. You know all the details. You know the ones that we don't see and that we've forgotten. You know the ones that our accusers don't see. But Lord, you also know, and I think we read in your word, we see that walking through the valley of betrayal and accusations is very difficult for us. And it's often unfair. But Lord, I pray that you would help us as your people to keep our eyes fixed on you in a way that lets us walk humbly and trusting judgment with you, taking what steps we can to bring the truth to light, but not in a sense of our defensiveness or a sense that we have to do your job. Let us walk in faith and trust in you. In Jesus' name.